Hello everyone, welcome back to League of Legends DFS Esports Breakdown for August the 13th, nearing one of our last couple of videos for the, kind of bulk part of the year. We will, of course, probably be breaking down playoff slates if there's any, maybe some other stuff, but overall probably going to have a pretty sizable break up until Worlds, so definitely pretty exciting stuff getting down to the business end of this one. So we'll go ahead and talk about it as we do. So we'll jump it straight into the recap from yesterday. Overall, pretty unexciting over in the LCK. Both of the favorites got the job done 2-0. I believe the LSB scoring ended up actually being pretty good. So pretty decent read, I guess, kind of in that aspect of it. Pretty pleased with that. And then over, of course, on the Dongshim side, got the job done over Hanwha again. Hanwha is just looking extremely lifeless at the moment, not very competitive in their own right. So overall, nothing too much to talk over about in the LCK. Over in the LPL, things got a little bit more interesting. IG did end up getting the 2-1 over LGD. This is kind of exactly how I saw the series go. Again, kind of fell a little bit victim of the odds in this one, but at the end of the day, I do think it was pretty close and definitely, it definitely feel pretty fine when, you kind of think the odds are wrong a little bit. You'll take a shot there and, doesn't quite go our way. Kind of sucks, but I guess that's kind of how it goes sometimes. Then LNG ended up getting the 2-0 over Weibo, so definitely, kind of just kind of got this one wrong. I definitely felt like, kind of this one just, I feel like I just kind of missed the boat on this one. I definitely feel like, I probably should have maybe trusted my gut a little bit more on this one. Overall, I think that's kind of feels bad on the day. I do think overall, when I look at the day, I did kind of have the feeling that IG was going to simply get the 2-1 over LGD. And although I didn't necessarily kind of say it, I do think I did kind of have the feeling there with LNG versus LNG versus Weibo. I did kind of have that feeling that it would be a little bit closer than the odds maybe as suggested, and we just kind of fell victim, I guess, a little bit to reading too much into the previous games and the and that kind of stuff. Obviously, they did bring back Ole back. I don't know. That's just kind of a tough one where I did kind of have a kind of gut feeling where I do think LNG probably would have. You got a little bit disrespected there, but nonetheless, we kind of just got that one wrong. That one's just definitely on me for sure. So we'll keep that in mind going forward. Overall, we'll talk about the slate kind of as a whole to start it off with. As we do. Kill totals looking relatively okay, and there's nothing that really stands out too far in any direction. We do have about a 23 in Gen GKT, 23.5 in T1 Dom1. Thunder Talk RA, we're about 25.5, so pretty decent, but not too crazy. And then AL Top Esports is at about a 24.5. So overall, about a 2 or 3 kill spread between them. Not too much. There's definitely a lot of viable options here. I don't think there's any Xing out we need to do quite off the bat, but overall, pretty decent slate. Kill wise, overall, when we look at the odds, man, these LCK odds are gone. I didn't. That's kind of odd. I wonder if they're here at all. I guess they are now. That's odd. League of Legends. There we go. Tomorrow. What did I just open? There we go. There's this one. So yeah, when we look at these ones, we do have Gen G minus 480, Dom1 or T1 minus 220 over Dom1, TT minus 230. So four pretty decently sized favorites here. Nothing too crazy to touch on, but we'll talk about them. I do think there's maybe a couple interesting spots here, but we'll think about that. In order, I do think TT versus RA, although these odds do seem a tad bit crazy, in my opinion, we do have TT minus 230 over RA. I'm going to just simply kind of agree with them, and I do kind of like, I do kind of like the way TT are playing. I do think they're pretty solid. I do believe they're still fighting for a playoff spot in their kind of in their own right. Yeah, I think they're in a situation where they're probably if they win, they're in the playoffs. I think similarly for AL, they're in a similar boat as well. So it's going to come down to the wire. It's going to come down to, I think, I don't know, tiebreakers and stuff between AL, FPX, and BLG. But I think TT should be able to get the job done here, secure their playoff spot. And I think they're going to be in a pretty good spot here. I do like TT a good bit. Going against RA, I think this is probably my favorite spot on the slate. I think we've seen RA give up a good chunk of kills as of late. It feels like this is definitely a end of season RA are kind of over it type of game. We could definitely see them give up just an absurd amount of kills here. So this is definitely one where we've been kind of fiending for the LPL Fiesta of the end of the year. These teams are not playing for that much. I could definitely see this one getting there, and I do think TT are going to hammer this one home pretty assertively. AL top esports. So we do have a couple of interesting changes here. We do have Harder coming in for Forge on the AL side for the mid lane, and then we do have I believe it's I want to say it's just King Tian, which is a crazy name to go with the jungler Tian. For top esports, replacing Wayward. You'd have to assume this is just getting some time in. I can't imagine they'd be looking to replace Wayward as a player. I do believe he's been playing pretty well overall, so it's just kind of an interesting one, but something to take a note of. I do believe King Tian has been playing has played for them before, if memory serves. I do believe he's had some time with them in the league before. Yeah, he was their top laner back in LPL summer. So it has been a year since he has played in the league. I do believe this was a relatively similar roster. It was just with Tian, Knight, Yu Yunja, that kind of stuff. This was King Tian, Xiaopeng, Knight, Jackie Love, and Zhou. So actually, relatively similar here. This is with Top Esports Zoom, Tian, Knight, Jackie Love, and Zhou. Looks like they were just rotating through top laners here. Nothing too crazy. I mean, he does have some past history, I guess, with the lineup. Obviously was with a different jungler, I believe, that was with Xiaopeng as opposed to King Tian. But overall, I'm not too worried about this one. Obviously, they're going against AL here. We know AL's been extremely struggling lately, so nothing really to take a note of here. I do think this is going to be a pretty straightforward top esports 2-0. I'd be pretty hard pressed to say anything else. Again, kind of similar to last one. I could see this one. Actually, I don't know. And this one could be a little bit interesting. In terms of the kill total wise, like I said, I do think this is going to be a top esports 2-0, but granted, AL are playing for a playoff spot here. We've seen, I feel like the last couple of times when we have these teams playing for a playoff spot, they play a little bit slower and kind of more afraid to make mistakes. So I could definitely see maybe game one being a little bit slow from the AL side and not being that crazy in terms of kills. Obviously, they're still putting out insane still giving out good numbers. As of late, I do believe they've been, they have a 0.9 kills per minute, despite them being, I believe, a 1 in 10 record in that sample size. So they're giving out a good amount. It's just the fact that they're, this is make or break for their playoffs. So I could definitely see them, being a little bit different here. But we'll look at a few of their scoreboards here and see how much they've been kind of giving up. So they had a 19 and 22, pretty solid stuff versus EDG. Versus JDG, they had 13-18, a little slower. Then versus RNG, it was 23 and 26. So pretty good overall. It's 26, 23, 13, 18, 22, 19. That's, I believe, 3 out of the 6 games went to 20 or over. One of them was a 19. It was just a couple of slow games against JDG, not too big of a deal, but one of them was an 18. So I think that's, 5 out of those 6 games were 18 or higher. They had that 113 in there. So we could definitely expect some pretty decent numbers from top esports, probably around like a 20 kill game. Overall, definitely willing to look at top esports a good bit here, and I definitely would not be afraid to play somebody like King Tian. Although, I can expect a bunch from top lane here from the top esports, side. They typically don't play through top lane either way. Definitely through, they play heavily, of course, through mid and AD carry. So either way, nothing too crazy there. But overall, looking pretty solid here. Again, kind of spent a lot of time talking about this when I do think it is going to be just the top esports 2-0, but nonetheless, over in the LPL, it's just going to be a couple favorites getting the 2-0 job done here. I find it hard to see anything else, to be honest. I think it does get a tad bit more interesting over in the LCK. We'll start with the Gen G KT roster one. I do think the odds on this one are a tad bit out of hand, although I could definitely understand why. Gen G have just been completely obliterating and sweeping the league kind of whole-handedly. They dropped one series, and that was to an early on SKT team, I think over here in week 4, yeah. They dropped one game 3 over to T1. Overall, they've had 4 game losses. Of course, half of those were to T1. The other half were to Dom1. I think they took two 2-1s over Dom1. So pretty insane dominant stuff from Gen G. I just think KT are not that bad. They're definitely like a definitive, I think, I want to say third best team in the league, honestly. I could definitely see a good case that that KT have been playing better than T1 and Dom1 as of late. But, you know, I just think overall Gen G are pretty dominant as of late. It's tough to make a case for KT to win this series. I could definitely see it maybe going to that 2-1 Gen G marker, just because I do think this could be a little bit closer than these odds are suggesting. But either way, I think Gen G will probably get the job done here. I probably will end up leaving Gen G out because I do think this one could be a tad bit more close than maybe it looks. But honestly, on the flip side of that, I do think there's a case where you can make where if you think this is actually kind of close, then you could maybe make an argument that if KT are keeping it relatively close, then that means Gen G are probably not ending the game very quickly. So that could be, you know, a positive for the scorers as well. So overall, this is just not too much of a priority for me. I don't think I'm going to necessarily X out Gen G here, but we know their numbers are pretty low outside of rulers. So overall, not going to be a ton of Gen G, but I do think maybe it could be an interesting spot depending on price. So we'll keep that in mind. T1 Damwon, this is definitely one very interesting. Obviously, T1 minus 220. We have two teams that are obviously slumping pretty heavily heading into playoffs here. T1 barely got the 2-1 over Nongshim. They 2-0'd Hanwha, lost to Gen G, and barely beat a KT team. Damwon, on the other hand, they got the 2-0 over KDF. Lost to Gen G in 3, actually. Got swept by Lift Sandbox, got swept by KT, and then barely took one over Hanwha. So overall, I'm honestly just very, very shocked that the odds are this way. I do think, although both teams have been slumping, I think this is a pretty close matchup. I'd imagine I'm not going to be in the in the minority here. I definitely think a lot of others are probably going to look at these odds the same way and be a little bit surprised how one-sided they are towards T1's favor. The odds or the kind of average kills is actually kind of high. I do think both these teams are actually playing with a relatively decent pace. It's kind of a little bit inflated by Damwon's insane average game time. They're looking at about 36 minutes per game right now. That's pretty insane. That's pretty high. Definitely inflates their totals a little bit, but either way, I think this one is a little crazy. I definitely see this one as like a 50-50, maybe a slight lean towards the T1 side, maybe like minus 130 or so, but I definitely do not see it as a minus 220 by any means. So I'm going to have to take with the Damwon side here. They are going to be my underdog pick of the day. I don't, if I feel like all 4 favorites win, then I'll pick all 4 favorites. It is what it is. But I think this spot, these odds seem pretty preposterous to me, in my opinion. I think this is pretty close. It's probably going to go 3. It's not going to feel great for your DK lineups. I definitely think for DK, you would probably be very better off looking over towards some of these other players and teams like TT, Top Esports, and Gen G. But maybe Damwon do enough as the underdog pick to justify it. Maybe if that means you could get up to a mid lane captain, that will feel pretty good. But we'll put them into the player stats here. But I definitely feel like these odds are pretty crazy. I'm going to have to go with Damwon here for sure. Overall, I feel like they've been playing at a relatively similar pace. I think T1 are continuously extremely overrated in the odds markets. So I'm just going to have to go Damwon here in what I feel like is a 50-50, but T1 is priced as a minus 220. And then we'll go ahead and look at the players and get out of here as we typically do. We're going to set it to the similar sample size that we've been using for our numbers here. So we'll go with Genji. We'll go with Dom1 Gaming. We'll go with Top Esports. And we are going to go with TT, of course. And then we'll, of course, yep, all 4 looking good. We'll go with the groupings as we typically do, see who's kind of making themselves up out at the top here. Nothing too crazy. It seems like there's a good bit of variation. The Dom1 Gaming, grouping is a little bit kind of across the board here. Oh, that does remind me of something I should have touched on. We would have to assume that Dom1 are going to go back to they're going to have to go back to Kellen here. I do believe they played with Kellen in their last time, or in their last series, and they won it. So it would probably be assumed that they are going to continue with Kellen. Yeah, it was Nuguri, Canyon, Showmaker, Duck Dom, and Kellen. It would have to be assumed that they're going to continue to play with Kellen. Granted, they did play with Bible in these few games versus Genji. I think it's a risk worth taking. I'd be willing to put in some Kellen into my lineups. It is pretty risky. I just don't see a reason for them to go back to Kellen for this one series. They win it and then go back to Bible. It doesn't really make much sense to me. I'd have to assume that they are going to go with Kellen. If you do want to go with a little bit of a less risky route, if you want to be a little bit more risk averse, you could definitely avoid putting Kellen into your lineups. But as you could see by these numbers here, he's at 84% kill participation over those last 7 games that he's played. Pretty absurd numbers. You could definitely make a good case that getting Kellen in is going to be pretty solid for you, especially just when you kind of consider maybe people are going to look to avoid him because of that kind of uncertainty. I do think it's worth the risk, in my opinion, but if it's a risk that you don't deem worthy, then definitely makes sense to avoid it. Overall, the general grouping here with Dom1 is actually pretty solid between Kellen, Canyon, Showmaker, and Duck Dom. All 4 above 70%, which is pretty good. This is definitely very pretty, very insane. I don't know, I just kept using adjectives there, but yeah, that's definitely numbers you're pretty happy with. All 4 players above 70%. Granted, against T1 play pretty across the board. They don't quite group up and fight as much. They're definitely more of a team that tries to play through all 3 lanes and stuff. So the numbers are probably not that great, but again, when you're looking at an underdog here, you could definitely make a pretty good case for to go with Dom1 here for sure. Of course, we know the names from the Top Esports side. It seems like it's just insanely heavily favored towards the Top Esports bottom lane right now. Jackie Love and Mark are both putting up pretty insane numbers at the moment. Definitely feels like Jackie Love is really starting to come online. Knight's numbers are going down pretty heavily. Tian and although these are Wayward's numbers, I feel like they pretty similarly suited for King Tian here. So overall, Top Esports, I don't quite love a lot of their spots, but you'd have to imagine players like Knight and Tian are definitely fine enough, to put into your lineups, although the numbers are not the best. But definitely would prioritize players like Jackie Love and Mark, of course. For the Genji side, they're coming up a little bit. They're actually getting a little bit better, and like I was saying, I do think KT can make this a little bit closer of a series. So if you do want to try to get some Genji stacks in, I definitely don't think it would be that bad. Their numbers, of course, are rising, and like I just said, I think this is a pretty decent spot for them. So we do see Lehens at 76%, Chobi at 74%, Ruler at 72%. Peanut and Dorn are both down there about 60s, but again, we just made the case of why I don't think these numbers are that bad, so I definitely would not be afraid to make some Genji stacks here and there. Obviously, Lehens, Chobi, Ruler would be like that core there, but either way, Peanut at 64%, not the best, but a top laner Doran there at 60%, that's not the worst. He obviously gets put on the Gnar a lot as well, and that's typically one where you want to group up with your team on. So it's definitely something I would not be afraid of to go to these Genji stacks and players at all. And then I do believe the last one here we do have is TT. They have a pretty solid grouping, but although it's not the best, we do have Yao Yao, Yukao, Beishuan, and Kepler all above in that like 60 to 70% kill participation range. Granted, I do think this is a very, very solid spot for them. So these numbers are not going to scare me away, but they're still not the best. Then we see Hoya at the 55% mark. I do think those numbers feel a tad low. I definitely would not be afraid to get somebody like Hoya into my lineups because I do think they look to try to get him down off the top lane and involved in the game. And it's not like any of these other top laners are particularly that crazy and who you want to target anyway. We don't have anybody like Abel or sorry, like we don't have anybody like Shanji or like Dove from last night with insane numbers who you would like to target. All these top laners are about the same towards the bottom here. We have Doran at 60, Nuguri 57, Hoya 55, and then Wayward at 48. Wayward is not playing, of course, but I think similar stats are expected there for King Tian. So yeah, I think overall Hoya would definitely not be I would not be afraid to have him into my top lane slot. But overall TT stacks I think are definitely still viable. So overall a lot of different options here. I definitely feel like it would feel a little bad to only have just the one underdog here of Damwon Gaming, of course, but I'd be pretty fine with having a good bit of Damwon here. I do think they're in a pretty decent spot overall, odds wise and all that stuff. But we'll look at the pricing. I feel like we'll take a look here. We do see King Tian and Hoya pretty expensive at 6.4. We do have like Doran down at 6. Nuguri's at 5.6. So Doran's looking pretty decently priced there. Top esports are a little pricey. T1. I do think these LCK games are pretty decently priced, especially Gen G. Gen G seem pretty underpriced here. Overall, we do have like Knight and UCal. Of course, the Showmaker down here. Chovy at 7.2. I think we're getting some pretty reasonable price tags here, so you could definitely kind of go anywhere you want. I do think Gen G are pretty underpriced overall. So I definitely would not be afraid to get a good bit of them in as well. But I like a lot of these spots. We talked about how much I liked top esports or bottom lane, so there's a good bit of options you could go with for sure. So I'll definitely try to mix and match some of these and hopefully get a right combo out. So yeah, I think overall that'll be it for me tonight. Thank you guys all for tuning in. I will see you guys all again tomorrow. Good luck.